What's up, and welcome to another episode of the Upland Show. Today, I am really excited that Theo Priestley was able to join me. He is very accomplished in the metaverse space, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. We can get into all the. I mean, one thing that stood out to me is his current experience on LinkedIn. Everything he's involved in is like more jobs than I've had in my life. So. He's involved with a lot of different companies, advising a lot of things. He's an author, so just really excited. But it's funny how we met. I put out a post about a week ago that says, guess which metaverse has the most daily active and monthly active users from the following, and I put Decentraland and Sandbox, that are obviously some of the most hyped metaverses, as well as Upland, because a lot of people are surprised to find out that Upland actually has more daily active users than either of those metaverses. But Theo said calling them a metaverse was wrong in the first place, and and I just started a discussion with him saying thank you for commenting, and I'd love to learn more from you. And watched his TED Talk, and so yeah, thank you for coming on the show, my friend.
No, thanks for inviting me, and I do apologize for my candor on your post as well.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate it. So yeah, give me your thoughts on, I guess the first question I could ask is, like, for you, what is the metaverse, and what makes you say these blockchain games are not the metaverse?
Yeah, for me, if we look at, for me, I try to stay away from the Wikipedia type of things because it kind of just becomes really boring and stale. And the other thing as well is that it was written by people who have an agenda to sell books and obviously invest in particular startups.
Yeah.
But the way I look at the metaverse is it's like layers of reality. So
Okay.
we have physical reality, which is our real world already. Then we have virtual reality, which is obviously a very immersive world that we can choose to live in.
And
We have
sorry,
the internet.
by definition, virtual reality,
Oh,
do you mean goggles
yeah,
specifically?
yeah.
Okay.
So you actually wear a headset and they're
Yeah.
closed, and you can actually see a 3D rendered
Yeah.
environment. Then you have augmented reality, which is you can either use your mobile phone or, and again, a set of goggles, but they have pass through, so you can actually see the real
Yeah.
world, and that's just overlaying information onto that. And then you have the internet, through the browser, everything else like that. And that, to me, the combination of everything all at the same time is what, to me, makes up the metaverse, which is you could actually have a toe in whichever one you want to experience, and it just makes up different layers of a much bigger experience or a much bigger sort of proposition. And the way I look at these blockchain games, for example, like Decentraland and Sandbox, is that they're a bit like Roblox, where they're creator platforms, but they're not by any stretch of the imagination a metaverse. There's no extension into other types of way to experience these things. Metaverse doesn't necessarily need crypto to be involved either. So
Yeah.
there should be a much freer way for people to engage and come in and out of these experiences without having token gates or high levels of, high barriers to entry kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's just the social metaverse, social and entertainment side of things. We have metaverse experiences, if you want to call them that, or layers, which are used by business. So, the digital twin simulation kind of aspects, that heavy manufacturing, real estate, design, all those kind of sort of industries use various different types of layers of the metaverse, whether it's augmented reality or whether it's virtual reality, um, or just using desktop applications to imagine these worlds and simulate things for their business and for their industry. So it's, we need to get beyond the video game kind of social aspect and actually, again, think of where the metaverse can apply to different industries.
Yeah. Okay. So that definition is really helpful. Do you think that the metaverse is already here, we're already in it, or that it's like this thing coming in the future that we're still working towards?
Yeah, I think we've kind of lived with some aspects of the metaverse already. I mean, if you look back 15 years or so, or even further back, um, but Second Life was probably the best example of a virtual world that you could inhabit and actually make commerce, live and conduct business in. And back then, companies like IBM and Dell and things like that chucked, good chunk of money as it was back then. 15 years ago, IBM spent 10 million
Wow.
basically building office experiences and wanted to conduct businesses and pull clients in for consultation and things. And Dell created Dell Island, which was a little virtual island that you could go in and actually order a Dell laptop from, and then
Wow.
see it being manufactured in a sense, and then you would receive it through the mail. But and we've lived with that kind of example of one layer of the metaverse, and we're starting to see other layers like Pokemon Go from Niantic. Niantic have obviously got their AR SDK, which is now allowing people to build different types of layers of immersive experiences, not just games, but obviously for commerce and retail and etc. etc. And for me, I think we're kind of getting to this point where the experimentation is still going on, but people are wanting to connect the dots a little bit more. So
Yeah.
connect the different experiences. So me as a user can jump in and out of any one at any time. And Nike, for example, have been a shining example in a sense of a company that understands how to do physical retail, link that physical retail to an augmented reality experience, and then you're able to carry that through into Roblox for Nightland.
Yep.
And then obviously they've got the whole NFT side of things as well, which have been really pushing forward with the NFT sneakers and digital assets. So
Yep.
they've got a real cohesive strategy in how to connect these dots together. And I think a lot of people should look at them as an example in the consumer space of how to do it the right way, that knows their audience and knows their customer, basic stuff, KYC, know your customer,
Yep.
rather than everybody who's just building stuff for the sake of it because it makes good for PR.
With the FIFA World Cup just around the corner, I've got some exciting news for you. Today's episode is brought to you by Mahoney Metaverse HODLINGS, mmvhodlings.com. To celebrate World Cup 2022, MMV Planet Football, in collaboration with Upland Football League, is hosting a giveaway. You can begin earning entries now by joining their Discord and inviting your friends to join their Discord. You can also earn entries in this challenge by guessing the score of the 64 matches in the FIFA World Cup. You get points just for guessing, and then you get additional points for every score that you get right. So you can win up to 4 points per match. Don't miss out on this opportunity. You can win up to 100,000 UPIX, and there will be 8 winners, and there will be UPIX prizes for all 8 winners. I will put a link to the MMVH MetaVentures Discord below, as well as a link to their website where you can see all the details for this challenge. Don't miss out. Great opportunity to win some UPIX. Let's get back to the program. I guess I don't see a lot of these as just a game. I see it as an opportunity of, true ownership of digital assets. And that's where a lot of this, especially the Upland blockchain game that I'm heavily involved in, that's what really excites me. It's not, I would say it feels more like Decentraland and Sandbox are high barriers to entry. It's very expensive to buy land. And only big brands like Nike and what have you will be able to afford, for at least for the current state, to have a real presence there and make an impact. Whereas Upland is doing more minor entrepreneurship opportunities, and I know you may not know much about the differences between those, but one of the founders, Dirk, is a PhD in economics. That's one of the reasons I was really drawn to Upland and the economy that he's creating in the metaverse space. And one of the key points that I really like that he makes is about the economy of a game or of the metaverse space, that it has to mirror the same economic principles that work in the real world, right? Which is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. are the four key pillars of a functioning economy.
Mhm.
And I guess what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's important that there's money making opportunities in the metaverse, like having jobs, or do you think it's am I overthinking it a little?
Um, so let's tackle this one in a number of ways. So it's interesting that you mentioned that Dirk has a PhD, because the venture that I started last year, we started as a play to earn studio to look at
Okay.
building a, a, a play to earn video game, but we weren't going to use tokens. So that kind of like annoyed everybody, first of all, because it's like, when token, and we were like, we're not going to do one. We're actually trying
Yeah.
to do exactly the same thing, which is look at a goods and services economy, and how, a proper player driven economy. And the only example, or certainly the example, or the poster child that we looked at, was Eve Online,
Okay.
which was, which is a proper functioning economy. It had sinks, it has destructible items. The players control it. The players create corporations, and this all naturally and organically grew out of the game. It wasn't
Yeah.
like they said, right, we've got a token and you're going to have to pump the token, and that's defines what the economy is, and blah blah blah. It was like, here's a sandbox. Everything in the game you can use to combine other items in the game and create things and create value and wealth for
Yeah.
players. Obviously it's tied with the currency in the game, and you can't off ramp it to make money yourself. But I know for a fact from talking with Hilmar, who's the CEO of CCP Games, was that the long vision was eventually that you could actually do that, was make money from the game by playing the game, and obviously understanding and running your corporation and your little gang and stuff like that. So that was the direction, and I fully agree that having a proper functioning economy, first and foremost, if you're going to do that, is the way to look at it, and it has to mirror it in some respects what happens in the real world, because those mechanics are proven and they work. I think what everybody failed to do was, or failed to understand, was that with tokenomic models and with pure play to earn models, the minute you list a token on an exchange, or you lose the control over the economy in the game or in the experience of the virtual world, because that's when you invite speculation, investors, everyone else who wants to make money off the token, who don't care about the game anyway, or the experience.
Yeah.
And so that upsets the experience for everybody who does want to play the game. And then obviously that puts that giant barrier to entry, because suddenly your 0.1 cent of a token is now worth $50, and who the hell's going to pay $50 just to start a game? And
Yeah.
that's when you started to get the whole the pyramid scheme kind of sort of situation, where you had scholarships. So people were buying their way into the game and then saying, hey, I'll sponsor you to come in, but you work for me, and I'll pay you
Yeah.
a pittance, and you spend 8 weeks paying off your debt to someone else. And it's like, this isn't a game, and certainly isn't enjoyable, and it's certainly not a job that I would ever want to do either. So this is why play to earn just fell on its arse and died very quickly. And I'm quite glad that this has happened, to be honest. And the whole crypto crash with FTX and everything else, it's kind of washing away everything. Play to earn crashed, and the whole tokenomic models started to fall apart, and it was a cascade effect. And now FTX coming along is kind of even destroying the model even further and washing
Yeah.
away a lot of the stuff that just won't work. So if you have a PhD economist in charge of your platform, or your venture, then there's a tiny glimmer of hope that something might actually, be sustainable.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely making me feel a little bit better hearing some of your hearing some of your arguments there, because Upland doesn't have a token like, Sandbox and Decentraland, and I agree with you, like you're saying, it if it's a play to earn game and there's a token that's tradable, that's fluctuating up and down, it's not stable and consistent enough. If you price something for sale in that economy, like let's just take the US dollar. If if I own an e-commerce site right now selling t-shirts and the US dollar is fluctuating up and like the crypto market has been, how do I keep track of my costs of what I paid for something, and then when I sell it for, you would need dynamic pricing to change every day. And that's why for me Upland made a lot of sense, is because it does act more like a stable coin. It's not tradable. The only way to actually get money out currently is, so there is an in-game currency because the game pays out like yield or interest that you earn on properties that you own. For example, as if they're up for rent. So you're a real estate mogul and you're renting all these properties and you're earning some income every month on those properties. So the game has all these tokens that they can give those out to build the economy, but then the only way to get money out is to actually sell one of your assets for USD to another person. And so I have seen that it's been much more stable. Like if it was tied to the crypto market, for example, I have this video I made where I bought a property for $4,000 worth of in-game currency. It was in like November of last year, and then I sold it in September of this year for $9,000. And so and I went back and I said, you know, it's interesting if I were to look at the cost of Bitcoin on the day I bought that property and the day I sold it, and I would have lost like 70% of my money. So what's nice is this one hasn't been following the crypto trends as much, even though it has a lot of crypto people, I would say, playing the game.
Yeah, I think it's really important that the economy within the environment or the game or whatever is actually protected from everything else. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bit like, sounds a bit like I don't know if you've heard of the game or the MMO called Entropia Universe, which is it's been going for about 15 years as well,
Wow.
as long as EVE Online and Second Life. And you buy in via dollars, and it has its own in-game currency. But it's very much a case of you buy land, you build items, you sell those items to other people, you make money, and then you can off ramp into fiat again, kind of thing. And again, because the economy is contained and it's protected from external forces, then you have a stable economy and it's never going to be upset.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because a lot of people in the community have been like, why is this not an exchange? Why can we not, cash out? And I'm actually glad that it hasn't been, because it has been more protected because of that. Some people make an argument for a stable coin. I don't know enough about tokenomics to know how that would like affect the current economy if it was a stable coin that you could exchange or something like that. But yeah, really interesting to think about. I'm curious, do you think that blockchain plays a key role in the metaverse space? Like, do you think blockchain technology is important, and like ownership of digital assets?
I think we'll see ownership of digital assets outside of video games exploding, and we are seeing that with with Nike, with Starbucks, McDonald's. You've got McLaren, you've got Alfa Romeo, all doing different things with NFT technology. You've also got the Rugby World Cup in France, NFT tickets. So
Yeah,
blockchain is going to be, I would say, more important than crypto.
I
And
agree.
I think people need to make that distinction now, is that crypto is obviously, it's financial based, whereas blockchain doesn't have to be, because blockchain, in a sense, is an extremely boring infrastructure technology. It's a distributed ledger. But I think it allows for the provenance of digital assets for proving ownership and launching new types of digital ownership. And I think it will be a particularly strong use case for the metaverse. If I'm building digital things or digital items in the metaverse in whatever platform that I'm using, and I'm able to sell those on, then for one, that that's a history of the transaction. If anyone wants to alter that item, they can do, and again, it's recorded. I have ownership over the IP. I can rent out that IP. So we're seeing these kind of things being explored with TikTok and stem drop, for example. Now, um, there's no reason why that can't be part of blockchain,
Yeah.
where creators can create a song or a track and then literally chop up every part of that, and then say, right, well, it's recorded in blockchain. I own the whole IP. It's an NFT, but you can actually have parts of this NFT, and use it to create your own IP with, and I get royalties back. Let's we'll not get into the whole royalties argument, but I'm a big believer in you pay people for what they have created, and they should be rewarded with those royalties, and it should be a staple thing. It shouldn't be optional.
Yeah.
And that carries all the way down the chain as well. So if I'm creating something new based on your digital asset, I get royalty for my creation, but you obviously get royalty paid back to you because you owned it in the first place,
Yeah.
or you created it. So I do think blockchain plays a really important part. But again, people need to start making that distinction between blockchain and crypto.
Yeah. Yeah. That aspect of the ledger and keeping track of all these assets in a more proper way. There's so many IP issues with the internet today that you can't even keep track of how everything gets ripped off and who deserves to be paid for for their work, and that aspect of it definitely excites me for sure. um I wanted to get into a little bit of how you think AI plays a role in all this, because I did listen to your TED Talk. How many years ago was this? 6 years ago, or
What year is this?
yeah. uh,
It was 22, and I think that TED Talk was 17, so it's
okay,
5 years. Yeah.
5 years. Yeah, and so you talk about, would you follow a robot leader? And we're talking about AI, and it was really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. That being 5 years ago, have your thoughts evolved since then? Have you seen AI taking more of a role in our life already? I'm just I could talk about AI for days, but and then I'm curious how you think AI will play a role in the metaverse as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the last 4 weeks, for example, we've got Stability AI, Midjourney, OpenAI, well, DALI 2. I discovered one today called Galactica, which is essentially science based. You can and it's text to scientific paper in a sense. So you can do research based on a text input, and it'll come back
Wow.
with loads of stuff. It's 40 million scientific research papers that I basically scrolls through and gets back stuff.
Wow.
We've seen the obviously text to image generative AI. We've got content creation. So there's a couple of platforms. Um, in fact, Notion have just launched one today as well that basically allows you to create content based on text-based input. There's another platform as well for content marketers, which is, you could say, write me a LinkedIn post about generative AI in the style of Gary Vaynerchuk, and
Yeah.
it will literally pump out a 500-word post fit for LinkedIn, based on generative AI in his particular manner of style or communication.
Crazy.
And so I fully expect this to be ingested in obviously in metaverse applications, where you could say, I want a metaverse that has pink fluffy clouds made of marshmallows, has bouncing mushrooms, and whatever, and has zero gravity, and it would literally create this 3D environment based on what you put, and then the I see so from a creator's point of view, I see AI as being a really good ideation tool. You can cut out 60% of the first thought process by
Yeah.
just tapping any old crap into the keyboard and seeing what happens, and then you start tweaking it incrementally to see what you get to. And I can see game studios, metaverse builders, creator platforms all doing that. AI will get interesting because of the amount of content being generated in the metaverse and people's interactions. And I think that's going to be interesting in terms of interpreting all those inputs, how I interact in the metaverse, my tone of voice, what I'm pressing, what I'm seeing. And, and then there's a lot of privacy and ethical issues around that, obviously, especially with head tracking, what all the where I'm looking, how I'm moving, the stress in my voice, etc. All that being sucked into by platforms like Meta, and what are they going to be using it for? Which is obviously advertising, but
Yep.
there's a lot of data in there that could actually power AI platforms. And so, as the metaverse evolves and expands, and obviously the different inputs and outputs as a part of that, I think that's going to power more, bigger, better, more in-depth algorithms, to the point where potentially, you and I could be just a couple of bots talking and nobody would know the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, one other thought I had while listening to your TED talk there is like, do you think in a way now we're already following a robot leader with things such as like social media algorithms, TikTok algorithms? People talk about all the time how scary it is, how well if you just start scrolling through videos on TikTok for a week, how well it gets to know you personally. It's quite scary. And to me, it's a little bit scary of how that like the younger generation growing up, I think of my little sister in high school right now growing up with all of this technology, truly one of the first generations that fully had technology running their whole childhood and stuff is going into college right now, and does that concern you at all of the influence of AI and how it can essentially these social media platforms, I think, are creating the social dynamics of our society and especially the up and coming generation.
Yeah, I think so. AI can AI has a lot of power for good, obviously, because you can
Yeah.
use it in Medicare and everything else like that for diagnosis and things, and it can speed up very manual and boring processes and give people more worthwhile things to do, which is kind of what I talked about in the TED talk.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think AI can make you highly lazy and extremely manipulative or susceptible to being
Yeah.
manipulated.
Yeah.
Um, so lazy in the sense of the amount of people that I see just take driving, for example. The amount of cars and people that I see with either an iPhone or a phone with the maps permanently on, or if you go into an Uber in your city and nobody actually knows how to navigate the city without staring at the screen anymore.
Yep.
And I come from a generation where I know the city like the back of my hand, and I don't need to use GPS. But now, that technology has taken away basically thinking to the point where people drive off cliffs and into swimming pools and things because they're being told to by, an AI. And then the manipulation side of things. I mean, if you can see children using TikTok, for example, there's this horrible 1,000-yard stare when they're using it because they're literally just scrolling through, just looking at 10 5-second clips and things like that. Or Twitter during during the pandemic, during all the elections, etc., etc. We all know about Cambridge Analytica and using Facebook for all,
Yep.
So human society, especially on social networks, is incredibly gullible. And it's so easy to basically throw something that's completely false and untrue, get a few thousand bots to tweet it or second it or validate it in a sense, and then suddenly it becomes fact.
Yeah.
And our critical analysis has become reduced to nothing.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of ethical problems around AI being used in that sense, and how we snap out of it. I don't know. It's almost trying to find platforms that don't use algorithms to surface content and actually kickstart and force us to manually curate what we want to read,
Yeah.
and get out of the echo chambers that we seem to be trapped in.
Yeah, and I think this conversation really ties back into the metaverse and Web3 that's being created right now. And it's really going to be a pivotal moment to make sure there's not, you know, people with ill intentions creating these, because we're definitely going to enter the next level of immersiveness, right, with the metaverse space and social media, and being perhaps fully locked in with, you know, VR goggles and even AR experiences that really affect the way we think, and really can change our perceptions of things. And there's a lot of potential issues there. Um, and so yeah, I one aspect though that I really like about Web3 though is that it feels like the metaverse and Web3 are kind of a hand in hand thing happening, and it feels like um, with blockchain, one thing I really like about some crypto projects is like DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and obviously just decentralization in general, and allowing the public to have more of a say in what they're experiencing and what they want created. Do you think that the Web3 and metaverse space are going to really shift somewhat of a I guess you could say power dynamic that some companies hold? Like, do you see big companies like Facebook or Meta, like Google, being a little bit disrupted with how much, you know, potential control that they have over those things? Like, is there some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, in your perspective?
Yeah, I think the light or the tunnel is very long, for a start.
Yeah.
Um, it's not so much about being early. I just think it's about, everybody says, "Oh, Web3 were early, etc., etc., and the metaverse were early," which explains why everything is so crap sometimes. But I think it's the fact that it's not about being early. I think it's the fact that we have so much work to do in terms of dismantling some of that. And you can see that we're actually watching this happen right now with Twitter versus Mastodon, for example. So you have Twitter that we've enjoyed for 15 years, 10 years, whatever. And we have this sunk cost fallacy mentality where it's like, I can't go to another platform because I've got all my content. And it's like, nobody gives a shit about the tweet that you wrote 10 years ago. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
you're not that
Yeah.
special. Um, and and so we've got Twitter, which is obviously one of the major platforms, heavily algorithmically biased. And then we've got Mastodon, which is decentralized. Nobody, I could create a server if I wanted to, an instance, and basically run it how I see fit, and it'll be my private place, and I'll invite people that I want to be part of it, etc. But it's still part of a federated network. No one entity controls it. It's open source. I can improve it if I want to, um, or I could take other people's improvements and things like that. I mean, I think, and people are, and there's no algorithm. If I want to find content, I have to go away and manually curate it myself and find it and things like that. Or I rely on other people surfacing that content for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic. It was almost feels like Twitter, what Twitter was right at the start. Um, and I think because it's decentralized, nobody's going to come along and go, "Oh, well, algorithms should be part of this now," because everybody will be like, "Well, not on my server, it's not." So off you go. Um, so we're actually watching this power struggle happen in real time.
Yeah.
For one, I do believe, and I'm a strong proponent of decentralized infrastructure, right down to having decentralized clients and um, decentralized storage and decentralized compute. And I would love to see more of that in terms of an infrastructure perspective happening alongside decentralized applications. Um, but I do think that it's a long, long way to go before we get to a situation where we have like a decentralized search engine that replaces Google and we all trust what it does, and it surfaces the right content for us and not for, and it's not, for everybody kind of thing. And the other thing as well is that it's not a binary choice. It's not an either or. You're either Web 2 or you're Web 3, and Web 3 is everything, and Web 2 chuck out the baby with the bathwater. I think we're in a parallel situation here where we can build things together at the same time, but we have very separate ideologies, and we just give people that choice. Which one do you want to live in? Do you want to live in both? Do you want to live in one or the other? It's not like we have to burn everything down in Web 2, because that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's like, do you choose an iPhone, or do you choose a Google phone, or do you choose a Samsung, like that?
Yeah, you've got Android or you've got iOS, but you can still access the web and everything else.
Yeah.
And people are building different
experiences for sure. Right. And I mean, that's definitely not as drastic. Maybe there's better examples, but yeah, it's really interesting for me to think about how it's going to evolve. Do you think there's any like early risks right now for or I guess let's talk about this. What excites you most about the metaverse right now? Like, is it something in the future? Is it something that's happening right now? What kind of gets you excited?
So I'm really excited about, maybe give it another 5-10 years to see where it goes, where we get over this kind of sort of immature phase where it's like Decentraland and Sandbox and these little games and things like that. I want people to start thinking about holistically what an experience looks like, and then how me as a user can jump in and out of each experience, or the same experience but in different let me think. How do I build something and I can experience it in different ways?
Yeah.
And that's and the thing is that it's seamless, so I can start in one place and then I can carry on and finish that experience in somewhere else, but it's still the same thing. It's just a different medium.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to being able that becomes such a seamless and way to experience stuff that it becomes, it's second nature. Right now, nothing is second nature. Using a mobile phone has become second nature. That took a fair amount of time, from handling it as a giant Motorola brick with an antenna to where it is now, which is this screen-based sort of a device. And maybe we need another 10-15 years of maturity to get to that point where it feels like second nature. Whereas right now it's a very much a break step in a natural process that everybody has on a daily basis. That's the problem. It's like, oh, I need to sit down and I need to put goggles on, and I've only got a 2-hour window because my battery's going to run out. Or I need to sit in front of my screen, or I have to pick up the phone to look at an AR thing, and I can only do that because I scanned a QR code. There's like so many steps to trigger something which should become seamless. And I think that's, once it starts becoming seamless and it becomes an everyday occurrence and it's part of everyday life and all the apps that I use and things like that, that's when I think we'll start to see a proper uptake of what the metaverse can be.
Yeah, I personally feel I think gamers will obviously love VR, and as VR gets more powerful, but I think that your average person, I really am feeling strong about, glasses, about augmented reality, and that being I mean, you could even see that being the thing that kind of makes the cell phone used less, like the thing, I feel like we're moving from thing to thing where it's like now people can get most of their work done just on their phone. You don't even need the computer because all the power of the computer is pretty much on your phone now. And even, TV, so much less TV is consumed, and we're always moving to these new things. And I think AR is going to be big, but I think you're right. I think that's years down the road before the average person's walking around with glasses that show them things. But I do think it will really elevate the entertainment industry. Um, we talked about music industry, going to concerts and having some a augmented reality experience I think would be really cool, like going to
Mm.
sports games as well, you know, not having to even look at a scoreboard, but you have the stats right here on your that you can just see as you're watching the game if you want. You know, I think those kind of aspects are really exciting to me, and I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the really interesting part about AR, for example, is that your experience can be completely different from mine, and yet we're wearing the same kind of, we're wearing the same glasses. But the data that's relayed, so you could be a real stats monkey and you're watching the game and you want to know how fast the guy's dribbling, or from a soccer or football perspective. So,
Yep.
what his score rate has been, how fast he's running at this particular moment in time,
What's the
all
heart
all
rate?
those. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You could be really into that because that's your thing. Whereas I'm looking at it from, well, what sponsorship has he got, or what nonsense
Yep.
like that, that kind of sort of thing. What's his hair color today? What hair product did he use, and all this, I but we could be served completely different information based on our own preferences that we set. That's the other
Yep.
thing, is that we set it, and that's the other aspect about Web3, is that we get to control the data, and our data, we own the data and our data sovereignty, and so therefore we get to dictate what experience is shaped around us. So again, you see one thing, I see another, and it's the same if we were walking along the street and you look up and you see an advert for something, and I look up in exactly the same space, but I'm seeing an advert for something completely different.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's where I think you start to get really excited about what you can do, because you could either act there and then you're suddenly transacting in augmented reality, or it brings up a web page on another device or something like that, and you're using two layers or three layers. You've got the physical layer where you're walking around, then you've got the augmented layer where you see the advert, and then you've got another digital layer like the internet where you're completing the transaction all at the same time for one experience.
Yeah.
And that defines what a metaverse is, not being
Okay.
locked into one virtual world or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious your opinion on like avatars.
Mm,
Obviously we have Ready Player Me, which is getting a lot of hype, you know, and they're getting involved with a lot of different metaverse games and spaces and things like that. Do you think I guess what are your thoughts first of all on those avatars? Do you think that's going to be something everyone embraces? Do you think that's just a gaming fad, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, avatars are interesting because they've got a number of use cases. One is that an avatar could actually be your sovereign ID in a sense. It could actually become your passport and wallet to all these different experiences, and that's where all your authentication and your identification happens. Not having to mess around with passwords and things like that, because again, all these experiences are gated by different passwords, different wallets, or logins, etc., etc. Whereas your avatar could be that defining thing.
Interesting. Haven't
The
thought
other
about it
thing,
that way yet.
yeah,
I'm
yeah, and
curious.
the other thing as well is that avatars. I really want to see avatars that are not humanoid, um, because in the metaverse is supposed to be, a transhumanist kind of experience where you can basically express yourself any way you want.
Yeah, sci-fi.
Okay, yeah. And yet all I see are basically just bipedal humanoids, and you can choose your hair color, choose your skin color, choose what t-shirt color you want, what pants color, that kind of sort of thing. Most MMOs, for example, have got far better avatar creation screens than metaverse platforms do. Now,
True.
obviously, this has been driven primarily by fashion and retail. So you can't have a tentacled monster wearing a Nike T-shirt, because you have to think about the variations here. That's where AI could come in, by the way.
Yeah,
All right, which
very
is
cool.
yeah, but um, we are where we are, which is again quite early. We have to think of the basics first and think about what the adoption curve looks like, and then start opening up to, you could be a plant and I could be a table, and that's how we want to represent ourselves, and that's perfectly acceptable. We don't have to be, humans at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. One thing that's really interesting for me to think about is I know for sure, that the metaverse space, um, it's going to be a thing. Like how it looks, that it's very speculative. But I try to wrap my mind around like what what is the big thing that like everyone has to have X, or right now it feels like like if you don't have a cell phone, and those avatars are just one example where I'm like, okay, there will for sure be multiple metaverse spaces, like most likely. And I do have a gaming background, so like I love talking about games, and the movie Ready Player One is one of the things that excites me most about like potential of metaverse, and the book especially goes way more into detail. Um, but I think about things like, okay, the avatar. Will there be one company that probably reigns supreme there because everyone needs to have an avatar that's compatible across all of these spaces? And I try to think about like what is the base layer that makes it all work together. You know what I mean? And that it's one of those aspects that's really hard for me to wrap my mind around, because it feels like you're going to want some type of digital avatar or something like that that is unanimous across like every digital experience you enter. And maybe you can, if you're going to a certain type of game, you can alter it slightly, but it's still something that represents you. Or you're going into a VR virtual meeting, or even work. Maybe people want to meet in virtual spaces and be represented as not as their human self, but as their avatar self. And I even think from a sustainability standpoint, and like going green and preserving the planet, that you could see companies like Nike saying we're going to make a conscious effort to produce less physical product and more digital product, and we want to see people communicate their brand in a digital way because that's more sustainable for the environment, and things like that, right?
Mhm.
um these are just a lot of my racing thoughts. But do you feel like you have some type of vision of as to like what's going to, in a sense, like what are the things that are going to be unanimous across everything? And are we already seeing some of those things, or is it all just kind of going to be crazy, and maybe one company will pop up 10 years down the road that everybody jumps on? I don't know.
It's gonna be crazy. I mean, everybody wants to have a piece of the metaverse and their aspect. I don't think that we're going to have one company building something and that's the one that everybody uses. I know Meta wants to try and be that company. It's never
Yeah,
going to happen. And it's the same with Ready Player Me as well. There shouldn't be one company that defines what avatar systems look like. It should actually be like an API, or a standard, a bit like NVIDIA and Epic are trying to sort of push USD, which is Universal Scene Descriptor,
yeah,
um, as a standard way of describing what assets and what scenes look like and things, and you break it down, um, and that should be what avatars should be as well. So there should be this kind of sort of common standard format where everybody builds an avatar. Everybody can build an avatar system as long as it conforms to this particular standard, because then it just means that you're baking in interoperability and that ubiquity across things. I can use your avatar system and it will work across a number of platforms.
yeah.
It's not dependent on people signing up like they are with Ready Player Me kind of sort of thing. It's the actual opposite.
Interesting.
It should be open. It should be an open standard that people can build on.
Yeah,
um, and that's kind of like the framework for all of the metaverse, in a sense, is that whatever you're building, it should be open, that everybody can build upon it as well, which is why everybody wants an open metaverse, an open sourced metaverse, and a decentralized one, because then no one company owns the experience or the platforms. They're open source, so everybody can build upon the base layer, but there is that common infrastructure, and common standards. and it kind of leads you to think about one of the things that I kind of sort of wrote about on my blog, which was, do we need an actual operating system? So we have Windows, and everybody uses Windows. We have Linux, and
Yep.
and there's a subset of society that use Linux, and businesses use Linux. Do we need a specific metaverse operating system that enforces or ensures that there is open source standardized API layers, infrastructure, etc., and everybody builds this, semantic web or immersive web on this new operating system? Who knows? But I think we have to start thinking from, at the ground level, in a sense. If we want an open or if we want an avatar system, what does it have to look like?
Yeah.
What, that everybody could use, and it means everybody, no matter what platform you build, can make use of it as well.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, I definitely think standardization, yeah, operating system. That's really cool. Are you familiar? Have you heard of the Open Metaverse Alliance, OMA 3? Have you seen any news about them?
There's a few now, I think.
Yeah, that one does have at least a lot of these blockchain games joining, Decentraland, Sandbox, Upland, Dapper Labs, where they're all coming together and saying, okay, we're going to build standards of interoperability to make sure that if you do have assets in one space, that if one does stop being supported, you can transfer those assets to somewhere else, that you do have that true ownership, which, as we know, is the really powerful thing out of this space, that blockchain technology and that true ownership. Yeah, and then my mind goes like the engine. When you mention operating system, like Unreal Engine is a really popular one that a lot of experiences are being built on right now. And then, like you mentioned earlier, Niantic, who is behind Pokemon Go, has the SDK, and they're making all their maps like available for anyone to come in and build upon that. And you almost go, okay, well, is that map layer a foundational piece that if everyone were to embrace that map, that is one of the foundations of an augmented reality experience that most people embrace? And then if people want to build a game that is going to be played, they're going to have to use that that map or something, because I think about, like, there are things that usually rise to the top that everyone goes, okay, I need to get behind that. Like, and in the gaming space specifically, you had Nintendo, you had Sega back in the day, and Nintendo pretty much, destroyed Sega. And then you've had like Xbox and PlayStation and the Steam store, and pretty much, if as a game developer right now, if you don't get your game on one of those spots, like, it's pretty much the average gamer doesn't know about it or isn't going to play it, right? Or if it's a mobile game, you need to get it on the Apple App Store as well as the Google Play Store, or are you even a mobile game? Because nobody's gonna play it. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So I think I'm trying to wrap my mind around what is that for the metaverse. And maybe you're right. Maybe it has to do with the operating system. Or I love this philosophy because it's so new and it's really hard to wrap my mind around all of it sometimes.
Yeah, I think that there's no real right or wrong answer just now. I mean, we have a lot of people who have been in this space for a very long time, but I actually think that's probably going to work against them in that sense, because they're trying to carry forward their views from like 20 years ago
Yeah.
to realize what they are today, or to realize them today. And it's like, well, actually, the world has kind of sort of moved on, and people's attitudes have moved on, and so has society. I mean, if you even look at the last the last, I don't know, the last 3 months, financial systems have collapsed. There's an economic crisis and a recession globally impacting people. And so, it doesn't matter how loudly you shout about the metaverse. Right now, most people are worried about, well, how much can I afford for my shopping, and can I afford the
Yep.
electricity next month?
Food,
Nobody's really,
food
yeah,
and shelter, right?
yeah. So, in terms of priority, we're way down here, and we've got a very privileged view
It's
at the
true.
moment. But it doesn't stop us from trying to build something that we can realize in the next 5 years when the world starts to uptick again. So I do think that we still have to strip back, stop racing forward. This is the other thing as well, is that a lot of what I've seen has been driven by sort of venture capital sort of mentality, which is launch now, exit in 3 years, hurry up and build something, get lots of money,
Yep.
and nobody's really building for, the 20-year exit or something like that. I saw a really interesting question on LinkedIn, which was if you could start something and know that it was successful, that you'd be a success, but you had to wait 20 years for that success, would you do it? And it's interesting to sort of see people's mindsets where it's like, no, 20 years is too long. And it's like, well, years ago, people built things knowing that there might never been a payoff, but they still built them.
Yeah.
But nowadays, everything is about building something so you can have a payoff immediately in 5 years to meet an exit strategy that your VC wants. And we need to unwind that mentality and build for longer term.
Agreed. And it gets us out of that kind of, there's a lot of waste and just
Mm.
it's not time well spent when you're just building to sell, or that you could spin something in a way that, and I think that's driven by greed and a lot of things like that. And I do think this decentralized economy, if we go more into that, if we I think giving people more voter rights and the community having more of a say will, I think, help a little bit with that. I would hope.
Yeah, I think the creator economy is really strong it needs to be really strong for the metaverse and for Web3 in general, to be honest.
Yeah.
And again, it has to sort of start without crypto and tokens in a sense.
Yeah.
I think you just need to get back to good old fashioned economics and understand what does a creator want to do and how can they make money from it, and then start from there. If I'm a musician, how can I make money from my music that can be discovered by everybody, enjoyed? They promote my music, they can create other things with my music, and we all benefit and get a share of the revenue from that, and then
That's
work
it.
from that point.
Yeah, that's it. I love that. You have a book. I haven't had the chance to read it yet, but I definitely am planning to. The Future Starts Now: Expert Insights into the Future of Business, Technology, and Society. So you mentioned you wrote this during the pandemic. Is that right?
Yeah, me and I co-wrote this with actually one of my co-founders of the business, Bronwyn Williams. We're both kind of sort of futurists, so we spend a lot of time thinking about future trends. And we got together and decided to write this book along with a bunch of other people, some other really clever people. And so there's aspects and essays in there from everything touching from AI to money to VR to future society in space, economics, all that kind of sort of thing. And
Wow.
it's we really enjoyed it, and it was written again during the first year of the pandemic, and then we released it in what year is this? Well, we released it last year, or it could have been this year actually. And there's an audio book as well that got picked up for an audio book. So
Cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Audible audiobook, so I'm definitely gonna get it. It said, hey, this one's actually free with a audiobook trial. It says like that. That's
there
pretty
you
cool.
go.
So I will share a link to that in Amazon down in the description below for anyone interested in checking that out. Is there anything else you would like to share with the community here with us today?
I don't know actually. I think it's a really exciting time. I think it's a really sort of volatile time as well. Um, I would probably stress don't be disheartened by what's happening. Because there's always going to be bad actors out there, no matter where you look. I think if you have a legitimate idea, definitely explore it. Definitely experiment with what's out there, and if you can see room for improvement, I would say go for it. Do something about it if you want to improve the industry that you're passionate about. Because now is probably a good time to start thinking and planning for it. I would do the opposite of what everybody else has done, which is actually build a prototype of what you're wanting, tending to do, and show it to people, rather than launching a token and then thinking about a project with a white paper and things. I think that whole model is dead now. I think people want to see the proof that you can actually execute. So find yourself a good team, not just a random bunch of people who want to make money. And also think longer term. If this was your passion project, or if this was a project that you wanted to see in 20 years' time still be successful, what's it going to look like in 20 years' time? Because if you can think about that, if you can actually see what you're building still being used in 20 years' time and still have a future, then I think you're onto something. And that's what I think excites me most about being, in Web3 and Metaverse, is that we are still early, but in 20 years' time, this could reshape what the internet looks like.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed our discussion today. Didn't quite expect it to go like this, but it's been really good, and would love to stay in touch and see what you're up to next, other projects you get involved in. Maybe we could have you back on the show in the future at some point.
Would love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being willing to just have some philosophical discussion with me. I as well like to consider myself somewhat of a futurist, and philosophically think about what is going to happen in this space, and I as well think it's going to be a big change in our society, and something that seems like it's inevitable at this point. It's just what is it going to look like exactly? And one thing that excites me most is that it's all of us that can create it. It's not just this big company or organization, that gets to create it and we all don't have a say. So that's one thing that really excites me about this Web3 space as well. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and hope to have you on again at some point.
No, thanks for asking me. Cheers.
Cheers.